Hi, friends. This is Andy Bargerstock, the host of Fringe Toast Music, right here on KRUU-LP 100.1 FM, the voice of Fairfield, Iowa, and beyond. Recently, I had an opportunity to sit down with Daniel Spils and Brangien Davis, the singer-songwriting duo known as The Argument, to talk about their new CD, the self-titled one. And we're going to lead in with a track from that album called Ogallala.
Hey, look what we found down underground, a secret sea in waiting. Pump it up, have a drink. The glass is clean, a liquid celebration. Used to be deep and wide. Now it seems cut and dry. No way to turn the tide. All of the fish are sunrise is almost down. Prepare for drought. A bowl of dust for breakfast. Thought it was all for free, but the giving tree has given up the ghost. Used to be deep and wide. Now it seems cut and dry. Oh no, used to be deep and wide. Now it seems cut and dry. No way to turn the tide. All of the fish are
This is Andy Bargerstock at KRUU-FM, and today in the studio we have Daniel Spils and Brangien Davis, the two members of the band The Argument. Daniel and Brangien, thanks for taking the time to spend a little insights and reflections on your musical careers.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Andy.
Daniel, I understand that you used to be in a band, Maktub, with Reggie Watts,
Right.
who's now the music director for the James Corden Show.
Well, that's true. I was in a band called Maktub with Reggie Watts. And outside of that, Reggie and I were in many bands together in Seattle for about 10 years. And that involved, touring nationally and playing countless shows and recording 5 albums. In addition to that, I moved from Anchorage, Alaska to Seattle in the early 90s just to be in bands. So I've been in a slew of bands. But by the time I met and married Brangien, I had moved more toward simply recording and had lost interest in touring and or performing live all the time and at such a breakneck speed as I used to. So kind of the genesis of the band was what I call a little upstairs, downstairs, just because of the nature of our home. In our basement, we built a modest recording studio for me to do my thing, and Brangien, as a writer, often would be upstairs writing while I was downstairs working on music. And at one point, we kind of figured out that we could put those two disciplines together, and that's kind of how the argument came about.
I've been really impressed with what I hear from both of you. I love the lyrics. Brangien, you really have a knack for that. Of course, you and I go back a long way. I think I first met you when you were about 9 years old in central Pennsylvania.
That's right.
Your father being a English professor at a small college, and I know you and your precocious sister grew up in a home where there was a lot of reading and writing going on. So it was not a surprise to me that you were the lyricist in this group. and
I haven't written any songs before, though, so this was a pretty new idea.
The thing that I really like about your website, and give us the URL for your website for those who want to visit.
Oh, sure. It's, www.theargument.us. But we think of it as theargument.us.
All right. And on that site, readers will find essays for each of the tracks on this self-titled album, right?
That's right, yeah. Because I always, as a music listener and a music fan, I always want to know what songs are about, what the lyrics are supposed to mean. And also because I'm a writer, I kind of couldn't help myself but explain a little bit about the lyrics that I was writing. And, of course, when you do that in an essay format, it brings up all kinds of tangential stories and little dives into funny research holes, and so it did end up, it kind of was a last-minute decision, but it ended up being actually, we think it's a big part of the art project that this album turned out to be.
Well, let's start with that song that we had coming into this interview, Ogallala. It's about the precious resource that we have dwindling in the Ogallala aquifer. Tell us a little bit about that and what inspired you to write this song.
So that actually was inspired by watching a Ken Burns documentary, not really knowing anything about the Ogallala aquifer before. And I was just totally gripped by his explaining of the story and how it was actually a program about the Dust Bowl, which I knew a very minimal amount about. And his focus was the Dust Bowl, but then he sort of comes out of it saying, well, we're making this mistake again. We're doing this thing where humans just take everything on the earth as if it's always going to be there. And this is happening again with the Ogallala aquifer because of overpumping and the runoff that's coming into the earth and all sorts of other dangerous things. And that's the main source of food for America. So it was just kind of a shocking realization for me. And, of course, because I'm a wordsmith, I love just the word Ogallala. And so when I had said that to Daniel after I saw it, he was like, ooh, that's a great singing word. It sounds so nice on the tongue.
Daniel is pretty much the musician, instrumentalist, and Brangien is the lyricist. Let's start over with Daniel. Daniel, tell me a little bit about what is the range of your instrumental capabilities and interests.
Well, so it is true. I'm the musician in the band, and I record all the music myself, except oftentimes I pull in a professional drummer to do the drumming, and I have a host of friends that I use for that. On this album, I specifically used Davis Martin, who was the drummer for the band Mock that I was in for 10 years, and we have this good relationship. He's a fantastic drummer. Mm-hmm. So outside of that, I have a 1939 Steinway stand-up piano in the basement. I have a series of weird brass instruments, everything from a trombone to the euphonium to a mellophone and a trumpet. So I play those at a kind of 7th grade level, so just enough to kind of put horn sections together. Not a great horn player.
All right.
And then I have synthesizers and guitar and bass guitar. And yeah, so I do play all those instruments. I would say this is pop music, so I'm not an expert on any one instrument specifically, but I'm pretty good at layering instruments together to kind of get where I need to go.
Brangien, of course, does most of the vocals, or you guys actually collaborate on the vocal side of it, right?
Yeah. I mean, in the beginning, Daniel kind of, as he says, tricked me into singing on one song that he had been working on, an instrumental track, and said, hey, can you come down here and just sing some pretend vocals or la 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 on this one song? And so I did, and then it ended up saying la la la, or la 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 la, actually, on Halibut Cove. And so I think that's the only song that I'm the only one singing on. Pretty much all the other ones, it's a combination of Daniel and I.
Well, the blend of your voices is quite nice. Chemistry, I think you guys really have something going on here. I had mentioned to you earlier in our conversations that I felt influences perhaps of the Beatles. What was it? Was it in time-lapse photography that I think we had referred to that?
Yeah.
I think I referred to the drumming.
We all project on music what we hear, and you heard that. I gave no direction to the drummer Davis on that. I wouldn't be surprised if there was that influence in his drumming for sure.
Let's move on to a second track that I'd like to hear now, and that's The Emphasis. And I understand Emphasis is about the experience of the passing of your cousin.
Yeah, well, that was obviously a very sad time. My cousin Brendan was an alcoholic, and he had all those troubles that are so hard to get out of. And the reason I wanted to write a song about it, in addition to that, was obviously just sort of trying to process this. But when I learned about his death, it was just in an odd scenario where I was in the veterinary clinic with my 18-year-old cat, who I was sure was about to die. I had no idea my cousin was about to die because he just seemed like he was kind of always going to be an alcoholic and be a maintenance alcoholic. And so I wasn't thinking about my cousins. I was really worried about my cat. And I was in the vet room waiting to hear the results on all these cat tests. And when my mom called to tell me my cousin had died, and it was just this sort of swirl of like emotions and changing which thing, important person / cat I was worried about in my life. So it was a lot to think about. And then I think when the song came about in that one, I think I had started to write something down, and I was working on almost like a poem that I had been thinking about. So the reason it's called Emphasis is that at one point Bryn had said to me, I can't live like this. And I thought that meant, great, he's going to shape up, sober up, and get better. But it turns out I think he meant something very different. He was very aware of the poor state of his health. So that's when I was thinking about, I got the emphasis wrong. I got the emphasis of his meaning incorrectly. And I felt guilty about that, of course, that I hadn't clued in to get the real message.
I can't
This is Andy Bargerstock at KRUU-LP 100.1 FM, and we are in the middle of a musical experience with The Argument, a musical duo from the northwest of the United States. You guys are in Seattle, is that right?
That's right.
And we're talking to Daniel Spils and Brangien Davis, and we're looking at and listening to the music from The Argument, their self-titled CD. When I first heard the CD, I was struck very much by the piece of music called Time-Lapse Photography. The instrumental creativity was outstanding, Daniel, and then, of course, lyrics are added later in the song by Brangien. I'd like to hear from each of you about the creative dynamics between the two of you in putting this music together.
Sure. Well, one interesting part about that song is it is very much a collage of sound. And the idea for time-lapse photography as a lyric actually came after the music in this case. One thing I can tell you about the music is I built it all around that kind of never-ending piano pounding riff. And it happened when Thaddeus Turner, the old guitarist from Mach 2, who's a friend of mine, gave me an acoustic piano. It was a 1960s Melody Grand, and we took it down into the basement, and I put microphones on it, and it was my first time kind of recording a piano, and I just started pounding those chords to kind of initially just get mic levels and just to see how it is to record a piano, but I kind of got mesmerized by these pounding chords, almost like the marching of time, and I ended up doing it for about 10 minutes, and that became the core of the song. The song in the end is probably 5 minutes long, but so that was kind of the birth of the song, and then I just built everything else around it, the horn, bass, guitar, drums. We even pulled out Brangien's flute from her high school years on that. So that's kind of birthed the song, but to me, it had this March of Time feel to it, and I had a kind of an emotional experience around that time where I had opened up iPhoto, which is just an Apple piece of software that organizes your photos for you, and I was looking back at me and Brangien's relationship and my time in Seattle and just thinking how fast it was all going, how wonderful it was, but how fast it was going. And that was kind of just, I presented that to Brangien. I just said time-lapse photography, and from there she kind of took the lyric.
Daniel had already written a lot of this music, and then this idea of time-lapse photography came in to inspire you to write the lyrics that he folded into it?
Yeah, definitely. Daniel had been working on this kind of epic-sounding piece, and like he said, he came up with the line, time-lapse photography is happening to me, which I thought was great, and so I just kind of ran with that, and in the same way that those images were sort of swirling around on the computer desktop, there are these boxes, or tubs of photos that, of course, I'm always meaning to organize, but never actually will organize. And I kind of ended up thinking that's okay, because your brain doesn't organize all your memories in perfect chronological order anyway. So yeah, then from there, of course, that's such a human feeling, that nostalgia, and the way that we can stare at old photos forever. They just draw you in, and you feel like you're jumping around in time. I think that's something that everybody can relate to, and so it just sort of played with that, with the lyrics on, how you are sort of feel like you're moving up and down, or maybe it's around and around in time and space when you're looking at old photos.
Daniel, you've had years of experience working with bands. Brangien is coming in with her literary and lyrical creative talents. Are you given any thought to doing any public performances?
Well, the quick answer is we've done a few public performances, and we usually, this is very much a studio project, and it's very much kind of like a family band. They're usually
of two.
Yeah, family band of two and a couple cats. So when we do play live, it's usually just with an acoustic guitar and our two voices. But I will say the primary goal is not one of live performance. I do see this as kind of musical collage in the basement, because I'm playing the role of every instrumentalist currently down there except for the drummer, and that's not easy to recreate live. And also, we're kind of happy with the experience, this kind of slow music-making experience paired with essay writing. That's kind of what we see this project as. So it's a bit of a hybrid, and it's not what I would call a traditional band in that sense. It's more a writing and music project.
So we have talked about, putting something together that's less rock show, which would be, we'd have to hire a lot of musicians, first of all, but less a rock show and more of sort of a musical reading event because that feels more true to what we're doing. I've done a lot of public readings of my writing, and I enjoy doing that. So something that we can put together where it's more like a reading mixed with a little music, mixed with some more reading, that would be more our style.
The argument is available in the usual places. Is that correct?
Absolutely. You can get us on iTunes, Amazon, Spotify, Napster, go down the list. It's all there. So, you can buy a CD from our website if you so desire. Then you can also just experience it on our website at theargument.us. We have the long-form essay paired with the sound and lyrics all within one document. So that's how most people have experienced the album, actually.
We're going to lead out with time-lapse photography, Daniel Spils, Brangien Davis. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thanks so much for sharing our music.
Thanks for having us, Andy.